We've had independent presidential candidate Bobby Kennedy Jr. on this program many times. And no, it's not because I am supporting his candidacy. That's not my place. It's because he deserves a voice. We have asked the former president on directly and through intermediaries many times. The invitation stands. Mr. Trump doesn't want to take it. We've asked President Biden to come on many times. He has decided not to take it. My job is to offer a platform. I can't force anyone to take it. If Bobby wants the platform, when it's his turn in the cycle, he's going to get it. That's the job, whether you like it or not. Fairness doesn't need friends, okay? Last night, Bobby's been saying they won't have me on. CNN, MSNBC, they won't have me on. CNN had him on last night. And clearly, this was an interview about making him look a certain way. And here's what happened.
When people talk about the threat to democracy that Trump poses, do you really think that that is an equal evil to Biden?
I mean, listen, I can make the argument that President Biden is a much worse threat to democracy. And the reason for that is President Biden is the first candidate in history, the first president in history that has used the federal agencies to censor political speech, so to censor his opponent. The greatest threat to democracy is not somebody who questions election returns, but a president of the United States who used the power of his office to force the social media companies, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, to open a portal and give access to that portal to the FBI, to the CIA, to the IRS, to CISA, to NIH, to censor his political critics.
So the headlines read, Bobby Kennedy thinks Biden bigger threat than Trump. Is that fair? Robert F. Kennedy Jr. here is to make the case for himself. I told you to be careful what you wish for. Here's one thing we know for sure. The Biden administration is not giving you security today, not after that interview. Do you want people to believe that you think that President Biden has done more objectionable things vis-a-vis our democracy than former President Trump did in the aftermath of the last election?
No, as you heard, Chris, what I said was that I can make this argument, and I didn't say definitively whether I believed one or the other was more dangerous than democracy. I did say that I don't believe either of them are going to destroy democracy. Both sides are telling us the other guy is the end of the republic. But, you know, they're both lame duck presidents. They're going to be in there 4 years. Their political opponents are going to be announced 2 years later. There'll be a new Congress in 2 years later. And we have strong institutions in our country. We have judiciary, we have the press to some extent, we've got Congress, and you have the military. You've got a lot of institutions that are bulwarks against a tyrant coming in and taking over democracy. So I don't think that's going to happen. I think we're all being told each one is a threat because it's a way of using fear to force us into a binary choice where we're forced into the canal, into this channel that nobody wants to go to, where we either have to vote for the lesser of two evils, and nobody wants to do that. But it keeps them from, it keeps a lot of the public from considering people like me that I have a much higher popularity rating than either of these candidates. So more people would rather see me in office presumably than either of them. But they are not going to vote for me because the media and this whole sort of cartel from both sides is telling them, oh, you have to choose between these two guys. The other guy is so scary. Now, the point I made last night, and the way I'm very grateful, by the way, to Erin Burnett. As you know, CNN has not let me on for a live interview in a decade, and she did that. She was very, very courageous. She gave me a very fair interview. I was really dumbfounded about how fair it was. She pushed back on me a lot, and she doesn't agree with me, obviously, on stuff, but she actually let me speak, which I'm grateful for. When CNN Digital got it, they cut my quote, so it looked like I was making this definitive statement that Biden was more of a threat to democracy than Trump. And of course, I never said that, but that's a way of making me look crazy to liberals. Here's the point I didn't make, and I think it's a really important point, is that you have one president who allegedly hasn't been convicted, but allegedly was trying to overthrow an election illegally, which of course is horrible for democracy. You had another president who actually has censored speech, and there's courts that have found that he censored speech and have enjoined him from doing it again. So there's actually a court judgment against President Biden, and one of the cases is Biden versus Kennedy, which is my case. The other is Murthy versus Biden, which was just heard, the arguments by the United States Supreme Court. What those cases show is that 37 hours after he took the oath of office, high White House officials were meeting with the social media companies, with YouTube, Facebook, Google, Instagram, and Twitter, and ordering them to censor President Biden's political opponents. And it was on, a lot of it was on health, public health, COVID, et cetera. But also there were other things that were being censored, like criticism of his Ukraine policy, and actually criticism of a kind of a satire of him and Joe Biden. The danger in this is that what the White House was saying, the leverage the White House had, was it was saying, if you don't do that, we're going to bring antitrust cases against you, and we are going to revoke your Section 230 immunity, which is existential for those companies. Section 230 is the section that protects them against defamation suits for publishing defamatory statements by, if you or I put up a defamation against somebody, that person can sue us, but they can't sue YouTube. Oh, they can't exist without that, or they'd have to vet every single post with a lawyer. So it was existential threat, and the social media companies then went ahead and censored us. The way they did it is they provided a portal, and President Biden gave access to that portal to about a dozen agencies, including the CIA, the FBI, CISA, the IRS, NIH, and other agencies, DHS, to censor, to remove people or to remove particular posts. Now, the reason this should be concerning to Democrats as well is once that precedent is established, Joe Biden, everybody, all the Democrats feel he's such a nice guy, he'd never do anything really malicious. But once you establish that precedent, the next president, whoever he is, even President Trump, now has that power at his fingertips, and he now can use that to censor political opponents. And if he did that,
look, I don't know.
Every Democrat would be out of their mind.
Bobby. I don't know, Bobby, that it didn't exist before Biden as well. I don't know that it was so much about attacking his opponents as it was making him look good at a time where there was a lot of fragility in terms of the messaging. It takes you to the same place. Whatever their motivation was, it was to be good for Biden at the expense of having a full discussion of all the variables that were going on during the pandemic. So you wind up in the same place in terms of the censorship. I am not against having government officials interface with the media. Sometimes it's very helpful to us. Sometimes they give us a lot of good guidance on things that we don't understand in terms of what they mean in or out of context, but obviously there can be overreach. I do think there's an upside to you in this little bit of this firestorm that you're in right now, is that you're getting a lot of people taking a look at you that weren't. And yes, a lot of the write-ups are playing to your biggest weakness, which is that you spout a lot of conspiracy think, whether it's deep state, whether it's 9/11, whether it's vaccines. You are painted with that brush. And I know you and the campaign think that this is water under the bridge. We've already addressed it. But I think that you should greatly rethink going there, because all those write-ups today called you a conspiracist. And I think that there are a lot of people in this country that want another choice, but they're not going to vote for a conspiracist. So what do you say to that suggestion that whether it's 9/11 or the deep state or vaccines, that you believe wacky things?
I don't know what you're talking about, 9/11. I don't recall saying anything about 9/11.
It came out of the Bergen interview.
I'm called a conspiracy.
Came out of, you know what I'm talking about. It came out of the Bergen interview.
I do not know.
Well, in the
what
Bergen
you're
interview
talking
where you
about.
were saying you're not sure what happened. You know what I'm talking about, Bobby. I'm not, you know me. I'm not trying to be sneaky about it.
Yeah, no, I'm not. Yeah, I'm not trying to be coy, Chris. I think if you go back and look at that interview or any interview, I never voiced a conspiracy theorist. I may say, I don't know what the facts are, or I'm willing to question government orthodoxies, but I never advanced a theory about what happened on 9/11. I can tell you that. Here's the thing, Chris. I was called a conspiracy theorist because I said that glyphosate, which is the active ingredient of Roundup, caused non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. People said that's a conspiracy theory. As it turned out, we won 3 jury trials in which they agreed with us, and Monsanto settled for $13 billion. I said at the beginning of the pandemic that vaccines were not going to prevent transmission. I said that because I was reading the science. I was reading the monkey studies that showed that they didn't prevent transmission in monkeys. So I knew they weren't going to do it in humans. I was called a conspiracy theorist, and now everybody admits that. I said that COVID lockdowns were going to be very, very harmful to children particularly. They would damage our economy, and they would not prevent the spread of a respiratory virus. And the reason I said that, I was reading the science. I was reading pandemic protocols over the past 40 years. I was called a conspiracy theorist. I said the masks were not going to work to prevent the spread of the disease, and that they would probably do more harm than good. And now everybody agrees with that. I said the same thing about social distancing, that it wasn't science-based. And Tony Fauci has now acknowledged that's true. Tell me a theory that you think I got wrong. To show me facts. I'm not somebody, I don't say things unless I have a factual basis. But what the defense of the political establishment is that anybody who questions reigning political orthodoxies is discredited and marginalized and demonized by characterizing them as a conspiracy theorist. But I don't know any place where I have advocated a theory that is not factual based. Tell me what it is. I'm happy to answer it.
No, I understand. And I don't want to drag you through the mud because all this stuff is discoverable for people online. I do think it's a fair assessment on vaccines that you sound more open to vaccine protocols as long as there's testing that backs them than you used to. That you used to be like, look, all vaccines are more about big pharma spreading their wings than they are about controlling anything, and that they're all very suspicious. I think that you have changed on that, and frankly,
Chris, I have to object. Chris, I have to object to that. You got to show me a statement I said. Like I can tell you this. What I've said from the beginning is that I'm not anti-vaccine. I've said that for 15 years. I've said I wanted safe vaccines. I want to have the same kind of rigorous pre-licensing science that is required for other medical products and other medical devices, which are placebo-controlled trials that are longer term. For the I took 3 vaccines when I was a kid, and I was fully compliant. My kids took 72 vaccines, and they got all their vaccines. So I'm not anti-vaccine. But not one of those 72 vaccines has ever had a pre-licensing safety study, which means nobody can tell you whether that product is going to avert more problems than it causes. What I think people should have is informed choice. And what I especially don't want is the public health agencies being controlled by the pharmaceutical industry. FDA gets 50% of its budget from the pharmaceutical companies, and NIH is allowed, which is the incubator for new pharmaceutical products, is allowed to collect royalties on the products it develops. So that is a conflict of interest, and I think we ought to try to get rid of those kind of conflicts of interest.
I agree, and you shouldn't have a revolving door among the 3 either, where people go in and out of the government agencies and they go, no, on that one I'm with you. But look, as we both know, I do you no favors if I spare you criticism, because you're better off addressing it than having other people assume your answers. On 9/11, here was my concern about it. After after you did the Bergen interview, when people started to process it, they said, hey, you know, you are having Bobby Kennedy on, and he says he doesn't know what happened on 9/11. I went back and I read the whole transcript of the interview. I believe that that's not a fair reading. You did say, I don't know what happened on 9/11, but I do understand the government's reckoning of it, and I don't have any reason to not believe it. Is that what you're saying, or are you saying that you don't know whether you believe what the government says happened on 9/11? This matters.
Well, I don't, listen, I've been around long enough that I question everything that the government tells me. And I think people who don't question what the government tells them are not paying attention. You know, when I was a kid, the government didn't lie to us. And 80% of Americans in 1960 believed that the government didn't lie to us. And then a lot of things happening. One, my uncle's assassination.
Right.
And, the Warren Commission report, which a subsequent congressional investigation came to a completely different conclusion than the Warren Commission report, a congressional investigation that was much more thorough. Then the Pentagon Papers came out in 1973 and showed that the government had systematically lied to us about the war in Vietnam. And since that time, I think you and I grew up in an era, Chris, where we expect the government to lie to us. So I think part of being a citizen in a democracy is to question authority, to question everything. Trust in the experts is not a feature of science, and it's not a feature of democracy. It is a feature of totalitarianism, and it's a feature of religion. But we live in a democracy, and it's science, but our policies have to be science-based. And so we need to question everything. And when new facts come, we need to question them again. And so, I'm not going to say.
Understood, but you're not pitching. You're not pitching an alternate theory. You're not pitching an alternate theory of what happened on 9/11.
No, I've never pitched.
Okay.
I've never pitched an alternate theory.
There's a lot in the air accusing you of it. I want to give you the opportunity to address it, and you have. That's what we do here. So, Bobby Kennedy, again. I've known you a long time. People know that we've been friends for a long time. I don't do you any favors if I don't tell you what they're saying about you and give you a chance to handle it on your own terms for this audience. And that's what you'll get every time out.
Thank you so much, Chris. I appreciate it. I've told you before, I want you to always be tough on me, and you're a good journalist, and I appreciate that.
It's not tough. It's just fair. If they're going to say it about you, I should say it to you and give you a chance to deal with it face-to-face with the audience. You can come after me when I see you in person. Bobby Kennedy Jr., thank you for taking the opportunity. Happy Easter.
Thanks for having me, Chris. Happy Easter to you and your family.